Welcome to the police department. It's time to speak to the Hamilton Police. Yeah, so we'll stay on the sidewalk this way. www.worlddoctorsalliance.com. Your government is lying to you. It is the duty of all police officers who have sworn oath to uphold the Constitution and to serve and protect the public to do just that. They are bound by law. I have some information for the police. It is absolutely necessary for you to listen to everything I say. I am going to, after I speak, I am going to come inside the police station and deliver to you everything that I'm saying on paper so that you can have it in your possession as actual physical evidence in order for you to begin an investigation. We are the citizens that you have pledged your lives because you love us to protect. It is now time for you to fulfill that duty. You have a moral obligation and a lawful obligation because you chose to. And we need you guys. So please listen to everything I have to say. Robin?
Take a deep breath.
I just want any help. Video? Yeah. On my phone. I would like to bring to your attention violations of the criminal code, namely sections 21, 122, 126, 128, 176, 180, 218, 219, 245, 269, 269.1, 346, 361, 380, 423, and 430, and Section 83, which falls under domestic terrorism. The names of the accused. The accused are Ontario Premier Doug Ford, date of birth November 20th, 1964, and the Ontario Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Doswell, date of birth November 9th, 1944. The address of the accused are employed by the City of Toronto, Ontario, and have offices at Queen's Park at 111 Wellesley Street West, Toronto, Ontario, M7A1A1. The phone number of Premier Doug Ford is 416-325-1941. The phone number of Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Doswell is 416-325-7780. Numerous criminal code violations were committed by Ontario Premier Doug Ford and the Ontario Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Doswell. The offenses were committed at Queen's Park. The offenses were committed on March 17th, 2020 and March 30th, 2020, and all other days that the non-demonstratively justified orders are in place by failing to obey to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Human Rights Code. The declaration of emergency was part of a United Nations and World Health Organization system-wide training and stimulation exercise of a deliberate release of a respiratory pathogen. I'm including the documentation within the package. The actions taken are an inhumane act on a civilian population. Page 17 verifies this. Page 16 shows it was planned before September 2019. The particulars of the offense are as follows. The date, March 17th, 2020, and March 30th, 2020. The location, Queen's Park, Toronto, Ontario. The offenses, reckless endangerment of children, child abuse, elder abuse, healthy people abuse, inhumane acts on civilian populations, bodily harm, failing to obey a statute, and torture. Section 21, party to offense. The accused did unlawfully commit numerous offenses. In particular, violating Section 126 of the Criminal Code, disobeying a statute. The statute violated was Section 7.0.2, 1 and 3 of the Emergency Management and Civil Protections Act. Emergency measures were not in accordance with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The measure violated Section 1 of the Charter, as there was never any sworn, under oath, demonstratively justified evidence or reasoning for any emergency declaration. Section 269 and 269(1). Torture. Every element of torture is satisfied as a result of the non-demonstratively justified measures, without any protection to the population. For details, please refer to page 6. Section 346, extortion. Extortion was committed on the population by the non-demonstratively justified measures. Section 361, false pretense. The accused misrepresented fact-based evidence, including the number of cases, the unreliable PCR test, caseload of hospitals, which are known to be nearly empty. There is less than one person in intensive care per hospital in Ontario to date. Section 380, fraud. The accused did not do anything to protect children and teens from extreme government debt. As well, they acted outside statutory authority to put babies born hundreds of years into debt for the lives of people who have lived and died many years before them. This constitutes being party to an offense of fraud. The measures were not demonstratively justified to incur exorbitant costs on the adult population as well. Section 423, intimidation, as there is coercion through threats of excessive fines for non-compliance of these non-demonstratively justified measures. Section 430, mischief. And be nice to people. We are a peaceful group of people. Section 430, mischief. An extreme amount of property was interfered with in a variety of ways. Guys, disengage. Section 430, mischief. An extreme amount of property was interfered with in a variety of ways. Properties were rendered useless, inoperative, or ineffective. Businesses, churches, and more. I will say, the GPMB put out a document with a copyright date of 2019, with a release date of September 2019, telling of a United Nations and World Health Organization planned stimulation and training exercise for the release of a lethal respiratory pathogen by September 2020. Progress indicators for September 2020. The United Nations, including the World Health Organization, conducts at least 2 system-wide training and stimulation exercises, including one for covering the deliberate release of a lethal respiratory pathogen. The emergency orders did not accompany any definitive, demonstratively justified information per the Act to prevent, reduce, or mitigate a danger of major proportions that was sworn under oath and easily verified, violating the most fundamental laws, violating fundamental justice. On March 17th, 2020, according to the Government of Canada website, showing history to that point, there was only 1 case and 1 death. This is not a pandemic, and we provide you a screenshot within the package. The accused follow a path without real justification and cause serious harm in virtually all areas of life. The accused caused far greater collateral damage and serious harm than the benefits from the emergency measures. There was no quote-unquote emergency that required a declaration of emergency. There was no situation or impending situation that constituted a danger of major proportion. However, there is one now because of these emergency measures. Thanks, guys. Can you switch papers?
Wow.
After, when I'm done, I want to make sure they have it, right? Because I know there's a lot of, there's some that will try to ignore this, but I know that there's some good men in there and women in there that really love our country, so.
And our people.
And our people. The coronavirus is not what is killing people. It is clearly, categorically, unequivocally, and scientifically proven that the radio frequencies that we are being exposed to is what is killing people. Why do they allow it? Because of multiple agendas. Primarily because 5G is the only network with the speed to handle the future. Where we are going rapidly is a world run by artificial intelligence. A new global currency is planned to be coming out. There will be driverless cars and a number of other things that need 5G to run on. They are happy to sacrifice millions of lives around the world. Let it be known that there was a moratorium held in a United Nations convention of which 36,000 different doctors signed this moratorium to stop the installation of 5G. The government has violated our rights and our national security by complying with these foreign measures to implement 5G technology. The cruise ships were installed with 5G. There were people getting sick on cruise ships. Hospitals have 5G. Major cities have 5G. Airports have 5G. So these are places where people will be expected to get sick because of the extraordinary, inordinate amount of radiation poisoning that they were exposed to. There was an entire conference including public health officials within Ontario in regards to this, and I can provide you with the details where to find that. We have had 3 pandemics in the last 120 years. The first pandemic was in 1918, the Spanish flu. This is when they implemented radio waves globally and increased the electrification of our universe. Guess what happens? Millions of people died 6 months later with a pandemic that they called the Spanish flu. Roll on a number of years, World War II. Just after that, another pandemic, which was the implementation of radar equipment globally. Satellites went up into the Van Allen belt. They sent satellites to the Van Allen belt. When that was implemented, there was a number of deaths from pandemics very shortly after. In 1968, the Hong Kong flu, they rolled out another level of satellites in the Van Allen belt. Over 100,000 satellites that were transmitting radar signals, electromagnetic radiation. We had radio waves first at the beginning of the century, and then radar equipment along with telecommunication equipment via satellites. This caused pandemics that killed multiple of millions of people. Now the rollout of 5G, and this is now impacting people's lives and killing people around the world, and they are covering it up in the name of coronavirus. Let it be clear that a coronavirus is anything from the sniffles to a flu. These are facts, and everyone please go study 5G. Russia has had no fatalities in the area of coronavirus because they have not implemented 5G on a public use. They've only implemented it for exclusive use by the military, hence why they've had no fatalities. Just to prove a point further, you're seeing in the news now that people without underlying health issues or compromised immune systems are falling sick and dying of corona. This makes no sense that the young are dying. The reason they are dying is the radiation is that radiation has no prejudice. Young or old, you will succumb to the power of radiation. This is a global phenomenon that needs to be reversed immediately. Next. It's okay. I'm going to read home. Torture on the civilian population. Using the power and control wheel, Biderman's chart of coercion and Amnesty International report on torture to demonstrate abuse by our government and the failure of law enforcement agencies. Power and control wheel. The power and control wheel is a visual tool that is useful in understanding how tactics of abuse are used by abusers to gain and maintain power and control over their victims. The Biderman's chart of coercion is a tool designed to demonstrate and explain the coercive methods of stress manipulation used to torture prisoners of war. The UN Convention Against Torture defines torture as the intentional infliction of severe physical or mental pain or suffering for purposes such as obtaining information or a confession, or punishing, intimidating, or coercing someone. Torture is always illegal. No exceptional circumstances whatsoever, whether a state of war or a threat of war, internal political instability, or any other public emergency may be invoked as a justification of torture. The purpose of this document is to demonstrate how we are being abused, coerced, and tortured by officials at all levels of government, federally, provincially, and municipally, and how our law enforcement agencies are failing to protect its citizens and therefore committing a violation of their oath and misconduct. Using the power and control wheel attached, it is quite evident that the government, with its overreaching Emergency Measures Act, is actually exhibiting power and control, and in doing so is in fact abusing its citizens, as they never met the requirements within the Emergency Measures Act to invoke it within the first place. In March, it was determined by the powers that be that we needed to isolate and self-quarantine for 14 to 15 days to flatten the curve, to ensure that our healthcare facilities did not get overwhelmed. This included the lockdown, where the majority of businesses and offices had to be closed down. No one could visit anyone, and we had to adhere to strict social distancing procedures. We could go to a few select essential businesses such as grocery stores, Walmart, Costco, and other larger businesses, as long as we sanitized our hands, stood in circles, and followed arrows. Small businesses were shuttered, and none of us could get a haircut. Even our places of worship, where one could find comfort, were closed. It is now a year, almost a year, guys, and while things have begun to relax and open, there are still stringent restrictions, which are now at risk of returning to the early days of the lockdown. Using the power and control wheel, various aspects of the wheel will be addressed to demonstrate how we are being abused. Yeah, okay. Using the power and control, okay. Using isolation. From the beginning, we were told to isolate at home and have no contact with anyone that did not live with us. We not only had to maintain 6-foot social distancing, but visiting or driving in the same car were verboten. Let me make it very clear that words are the most important part of every society, because it's the words that we use that define the laws that keep the peace. Social distancing and physical distancing are two very different things. And for our officers, it is so important that you understand that the use of these words are absolutely intentional. They are absolutely intentional, they're a manipulation, and this is how they cause uprising and public unrest in our society, and this is how they turn our police on their people and cause the people to rise radically. So please, understand, when you social distance from somebody, you don't talk to them anymore because they've been gossiping about you. When you physically distance from somebody, you do that when they're sneezing or coughing to protect your own health. There is a difference, and the definitions matter. Our support systems have been decimated. Elderly people and palliative patients are dying alone. This is beyond abuse. It is cruel, and it is heartless, and it is genocide. This falls under controlling what someone does and limiting outside involvement. No one can get close enough to witness if there is abuse or neglect, or if people are mentally or emotionally stable. Of course, controlling where someone goes falls under this category. At the beginning, we were not allowed to go to parks, travel out of town, or out of the province. Oh yeah, we're still not allowed, thank you, to travel to the US openly as the border is closed. And now we're being told that having vaccines are not going to be mandatory, but you're not going to be able to go to concerts. You're not going to be able to travel unless you take one. That means that they're mandatory. That is absolute disgust. That is absolutely disgusting, unlawful, illegal, and needs to be addressed. In the future, it seems that there will be isolation facilities, which we are now seeing being put up all over the country. People in Quebec have already been forcefully taken off the street for sneezing and thrown into an isolation, or rather, concentration camp. This is disgusting. This could be your family members. This could be your own children. While searching for information on the topic of isolation, the following information was discovered. California civil rights attorney Lee Dundas published a video on Facebook a few weeks ago to show the devastating consequences of isolating children and forcing them to practice social distancing at places like school. It was developed 70 years ago by the CIA to break down enemies of state. It is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day and being an alcoholic. It doubles the risk of death and destroys the part of the brain responsible for learning. A child's risk of dying from COVID is 0.0% per the CDC. No child has passed on COVID to a family member or third party. On April 12th, the Government of Canada received a repository report, which I can supply to the police, from the science team that made headlines for allegedly isolating COVID-19. Within this report, you will learn that they did not isolate COVID-19. What they did do was collect several different samples from several different patients who all shared common symptoms. They tested those genetic samples and found various pathogens that were similar in strain. They never isolated COVID-19, and to date, over 100 countries that have filed access to information requesting evidence of the isolation of COVID-19 have still not received any evidence. That it has never been isolated. On May 5th, a report came out in the Toronto Star by Dr. Sakdev Sidhu. He is the professor of biomolecular engineering at the University of Toronto via the Donnelly Centre. He reported to the Toronto Star on May 5th that he supplied the government with a, quote, cure for all symptoms of coronavirus. That cure was in the form of a synthetic antibody that has a 99.99% effect rate at alleviating all symptoms of COVID-19, sorry, of coronavirus, to everyone and was hypoallergenic. The government ignored this cure. They put it on the back burner in favor of a $300 million deal that they signed with pharmaceutical companies. These companies are responsible for 500,000 children in India becoming either mentally retarded, paralyzed, or dead from the polio vaccines. They have no liability. These companies are responsible for the death of 180,000 children in Africa because they have no liability. Are we going to allow our population to be decimated as well? Using economic abuse, preventing someone from working. With the closure of offices, schools, and small businesses, economic issues have affected a large percentage of citizens. Businesses and offices closing have caused economic hardship in terms of revenue, as well as employees being laid off or losing their jobs. We see a rise in addiction, we see a rise in abuse, mainly domestic abuse and child abuse. The fact that homeschooling their children, daycare centers were also closed, and with self-isolation models, it was nearly impossible to access childcare services. With all the loss of income, people had no choice but to apply for CERB and other benefits from the government, like welfare, making them ask for money and giving them an allowance. It is very interesting that the government employees, federally, provincially, and municipally, have continued to get their paycheck even though they have been working reduced hours from home. Some doctors are able to continue receiving a paycheck even though they do not have to physically see any patients or perform any physical examinations. Teachers have continued to be paid. No economic hardship, it seems. One wonders if those that have not lost economically are the ones filling out the surveys in favor of more restrictions. We have tent cities popping up in every city across the nation, including children, small children, and even babies. What happened to serving and protecting? Using coercion and threats. One statement that is repeated regularly is basically, if you do not comply, you could kill grandma. But it is an empty threat. They are killing countless elderly folk by isolating them. Most elderly are very lonely to begin with. Not being able to have visitors or emotional support from their families is throwing them into despair and hopelessness, therefore causing their immune system further damage and causing them a quicker death. Should they be unfortunate enough to contract COVID-19, should COVID-19 even exist, as it has never been isolated? Apparently numerous DNR orders were issued without permission of the patient or family. As well, the loneliness and isolation are driving a number of elderly people to seek medical assistance and dying. As you can see, isolation is a bigger threat than the disease itself. In the last 10 months, over 820 children under the age of 15 have killed themselves. The youngest child was 8 years old in Edmonton. She wrote, "Mommy, I'm sorry, I don't want to be alone anymore," on the bathroom mirror, and took a hairdryer into the bathtub.
Wow. Yep. But they gave her the...
What happened to serve and protect? Sorry guys, I'm a mother. Using intimidation. It is intimidating to go to shops and services and be greeted with someone policing the entrances. Do you have a mask? For some reason, many of these people are very militant and very disrespectful. It is quite stressful to go anywhere, especially if one does not know the routine for that particular establishment. To be talked down to, degraded by irate, ignorant, and arrogant people with superiority complexes is very scary for the disabled and the elderly. We have seen our elderly become abused by mall cops. We have seen a member of the Canadian Armed Forces who was complying out of respect and courtesy with public health measures within a mall get jumped by 5 security guards in a mall. That is disgusting. And that could be you guys when you're off duty. That is disgusting. Next one, please. What we need is we need our police to uphold, forget the oath. We need you guys to uphold your own moral values. You became officers because you have a love for your community. You became officers and you put your lives on the line for us. We're willing to stand beside you, and we always have. We would never defund our police. We believe in giving you guys more money and more access to resources so that you guys can continue to protect the lives of our children, ourselves, and our societies. You know, underneath it all, we are all just people, and we have an obligation, no matter our differences, no matter our beliefs, to protect one another and to provide our children with a better world than the one we were handed. We are all obligated to do this. All we're asking for today, guys, is that you take all this information and you investigate it. Thank you. Isolation has been discussed in detail. The so-called 14 days to flatten the curve quarantine was in essence house arrest and solitary confinement. Certainly, the isolation of our elders and disabled with the ability to even visit amongst themselves was tantamount to torture. The United Nations Committee Against Torture stated that full isolation for 22 to 23 hours a day in super maximum security prisons is unacceptable. The United Nations have also banned the use of solitary confinement for longer than 15 days. To this day, when one travels to another country or may have been in contact with a person who tested positive, they must remain in isolation for at least 14 days, which means not one leaving one's residence for any reason. Let it be clear that Kary Mullis was the inventor of the PCR test. He was a Nobel laureate who himself declared the PCR test to be absolutely ineffective in testing for infectious disease. This has been proven now, and there is case law to support it, that these tests, they render a 97% false positive rate. Not 50%, 97% false positive rate. These tests are absolutely useless. Next one, please. We can provide the police with, there's tons of evidence, and I'm going to give a website for anybody who's listening to access the evidence. It's www.freedomforumcanada.com/background. All the evidence, including the original repository report provided to the government on April 12th, including all of the public releases from Dr. Sekdev Sidhu, the professor of biomolecular engineering at the Donnelly Center from University of Toronto, is all accessible right here on this page, including his complaint and his frustration with the government, which was also publicly reported later on August 29th. Moving forward, having argued and demonstrated using the various tools that we are in fact being tortured by all levels of our government, it is now imperative that we call on law enforcement to investigate the criminal behavior of the Ontario government as well as local municipalities. All the lockdown measures and mask mandates must be rescinded immediately, and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Ontario Human Rights Code must be honored. The state of emergency ended at the end of July. This order was revoked July 24th, 2020. The termination date of the emergency was July 29th, 2020. However, the government has retained all extreme and extraordinary measures as if it was still in a state of emergency. In addition, according to Randy Hillier, MPP, Premier Doug Ford will not reveal who is a part of the COVID command. The agenda, minutes, or communications are hidden, and this unelected and unaccountable team is allowed to come up with all kinds of outrageous edicts without debate, discussion, or vote. According to documentation on the website standupcanada.solutions, declarations of emergency in every province fail to meet the criteria and are in violation of the Emergency Management and Civil Protections Act. Next, please. It is apparent that this, quote, virus is a part of a global plan with a much bigger agenda. I know it sounds crazy. I am a clinical psychologist. Believe me, it sounded crazy to me too, but it is not crazy. It is the absolute truth. It is obvious that the majority of governments are in lockstep with each other. For information, please view the pandemic documentaries where the world's most renowned scientists and doctors with valid, current, and verified licenses in all of their fields that all respective to COVID-19 discuss that this is nonsense. It is extremely disturbing to view parts of the world that are essentially in a police state. If this lockstep tyranny progresses as it appears to be, then it will not be long before we find ourselves in a police state in Canada. Quebec is already taking measures that indicate it is headed towards a police state. Guys, level with me. Where do you think this is going to end up? The more they try to mandate against a people within a free society, the more pushback they're going to receive. This is only going to end bad unless you guys take our evidence and investigate. And I know and I guarantee that once you investigate, you will find the crimes and you will side with the people, and we can take care of this and get rid of this tyranny on our society. The coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 test can only test for a sequence of RNA and not a virus. A CDC reported 9,200 people died in Canada with COVID-19. So we've had a cure since May 5th. We've had a cure from our own scientists since May 5th. How many Canadians died that did not have to die? That is murder. And we have the evidence. Without proof of COVID-19 nor a reliable test, the regular flu season death rate and unmet emergency conditions COVID-19 measures are not demonstratively justified. This means top officials acted privately, outside statutory authority, and are privately liable. As well, no actions by any lieutenant governor, premier, governor, attorney general, solicitor general, top health official, mayor, health department, chief of police, etc. were demonstratively justified. Actions were all fear-based without fact-based evidence, illegal, unlawful, and nothing was sworn under oath. We want you guys to force them to provide evidence that it exists. Undeniable evidence of this pathogen being isolated. You won't find it. From the Emergency Management and Civil Protections Act, Section 7.0.21 states, the purpose of making orders under this section is to promote the public good by protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the people of Ontario in times of declared emergencies, in a manner that is subject to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. In a manner that is subject to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which means that you guys have power over what they're doing. You guys have the power to end the tyranny. You need to comprehend it. And you are protected by your oath. Your jobs are protected by your oath. And believe me, you are also protected by the people. From the Constitution Act 1982, Part 1, Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Section 52 states, the Constitution of Canada is the supreme law of Canada, and any law that is inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution is, to the extent of its inconsistency, of no force or effect. Further, Sections 1 and then 2 of the Constitution Act of 1982, Section 1, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in its subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstratively justified in a free and democratic society. Let me once again declare that these emergency measures have no demonstrable justification, and we have provided proof within the package. A partial list of freedoms includes Section 6, Subsection 2, every citizen of Canada and every person who has the status of a permanent resident of Canada has the right, subsection B, my gosh, so much fun, to pursue the gaining of a livelihood in any province. Section 9, everyone has the right not to be arbitrarily detained or imprisoned, like in your own home. Section 12, everyone has the right not to be subjected to any cruel and unusual treatment or punishment, like treating healthy people guilty of being sick, guilty until proven innocent. Asymptomatic it says it within the report that asymptomatic people are neither threatened by nor capable of spreading any of the pathogens discovered. Final thoughts, guys. I'm not going to keep you here. Everything else is provided within the package. From the Emergency Management and Civil Protections Act, the definition of emergency is what the police have allowed to actually happen. We are now in emergency due to the declared emergency. Quote, emergency unquote, means a situation or an impending situation that constitutes a danger of major proportions that could result in serious harm to persons or substantial damage to property that is caused by the forces of nature, a disease, or other health risk, an accident or an act, whether intentional or otherwise. Let this be clear to police. Section 7.0.1, subsection 3 of the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act was not demonstratively justified. All measures were not in a manner that was subject to the Charter, and it is your duty to safeguard. And for some reason, police across the country have been failing to do so. And I believe that it has something to do with the psycholinguistic manipulation of terms and the miscomprehension of simple definitions. And it's nobody's fault. We are indoctrinated to be this way. Police are just the same as the regular citizens. Words are everything. Words are everything. Use a legal dictionary, not a common language one. Almost everybody is aware of empty hospitals and test centers with videos proving the emptiness. Many know about fraudulent death certificates, and you are pointed to Section 128 of the Criminal Code for that. Start questioning the coroners, guys. Another atrocity includes obstructing and preventing religious services covered in Section 176 of the Criminal Code. Many police officers do not know who has the duty to safeguard our fundamental rights and freedoms, especially when there were no demonstratively justified orders. It is written in the Police Services Act that the police have to safeguard the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Human Rights Code. We know that you guys have the best intentions for us. We just want you to act on them. Police officers have said that anyone who goes against the system will have their career shot. Are the police officers acting in good faith by not enforcing the law? No, not at all. And they are privately liable for this lack of good faith as it is acting outside of statutory duties. The RCMP is also responsible for crimes against the laws of Canada being committed. Currently, there is a crime in progress with the measures of lockdown. These measures disobey several statutes, namely the Constitution Act of 1982, the Police Services Act, and especially the Emergency Management and Civil Protections Act, causing every police officer to commit misconduct, as well as criminal code offenses, violations in the Police Services Act, as well as criminal code violations by police officers. They are essentially turning our police into criminals. Look at what happened in Coburg. We have police officers assaulting citizens, stalking and assaulting citizens. And they're focusing on the rookies because the older guys know better. Guys, but this is so important. And you know, and all that's gonna do is cause more public unrest and more people to rise against you when we need you, when we need each other. Police officers have stated, I'd love to speak out, but I can't, I'd lose my job. You will not lose your job. You are protected by your oath, and you are protected by your people. I promise you that. I promise you that. If they whistleblow the system is going to find a way to punish them. They'll get unwanted desk job or a job they will hate in order to make them quit. Police officers and other peace officers are afraid to speak up because they are in the system. Basically a career-ending move. At what point do you speak out when your freedoms are all gone? When people are getting hurt, like in the US? Police officers don't trust the RCMP and flatly stated the RCMP is really corrupt. We all agree. They mentioned that there is a cover-up in the Nova Scotia murders. There is no reasonable information that they are not telling us what they know. Honest police officers, you are encouraged to do your jobs and take out your colleagues using the criminal code to reset to honesty, integrity, and freedom. All the very morals and values that you became police officers because of. However, if you fail to protect us from this point on, you will be held criminally and privately liable because we are left with no other option. For a few last words, I'd like to say, just from my heart, guys, we really love you guys. We really respect and appreciate all of the work that you do for us, and we have been standing beside you. We are the ones that stand up against all these other groups fighting to take you guys out. And believe me, once they're done with us, they're coming for you. This is not a new method. You can look into history yourselves. And what we're doing, we're people just like you. We got kids just like you, parents just like you. Investigate the information we're giving you. That's all we're asking. Because we know that you will find the crimes. Stand up for us and we will stand for you. And please do check out Police on Guard for Thee, because cops around the country are finally starting to rise up. And join them, and come out to the marches with us, and stand with us as one people, and we can end this so quickly and set an example that will ripple across the entire world, and I mean that. So thank you guys very much for listening and taking the time. Can I have the package for them?
Aho?
Yep, take that.
Give them both.
Yeah, I'm gonna give them both. So here, can you take this?
Why not have them come outside?
They're right here.
Oh, okay.
They're right here. They've been outside. They're listening.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much. We get it here now.
You want this to go to our legal department then?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Please, but maybe try and make a copy first, guys. Like, it's important that individual please get it as well.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. God bless.
Would you like more copies?
You want more copies,
Oh, we're
guys?
good. We got a photocopy.
Thank you. We're here to safeguard the fundamental rights and freedoms in the Human Rights Code as well. That's the reason why I'm here.
Let the police be, guys. Be nice. Be nice. We're peaceful people. Be nice.
We're going city to city to police stations. Guys, we're going city to city to police stations. And we're going to do this. And we're going to deliver them very fast. Oh, they were listening. We have to listen. We need to learn how to trust in each other, in our communities. We need to learn how to trust, build trusting relationships again with our police. Okay? We can end this if we do it together. And I give all the praise to police on guard for thee. Keep growing that group. Come out and march with your people. Because if we do this, we will end this. This is how they did it. If they turn the police, if they succeed in turning the police on the people will rise radically, and then any measures that come after that from this corrupt government are demonstratively justifiable. Do not give them that justification. Let's build strong, healthy relationships and take out these tyrannical assholes.
All right, back to the call.
Aho!